Episode 2, have a seat, let's go. Hey guys, it's Gabe Trujillo here. Welcome to episode 2 of Have a Seat. This week I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Sub-Acute unit that I was in when I first became sick way back in 1997. So after my first month in the intensive care unit, I had progressed well enough to be moved out of the ICU, but not necessarily well enough to go home. So at that point, doctors decided to transfer me to what was known as the Sub-Acute unit, which was another unit there at Phoenix Children's Hospital way back in 1997. So like I said, after about a month in the intensive care unit, they transferred me over there, and it was from there when I started my rehab and to learn a little bit more about my new life as a quadriplegic. Now, my first impression of the unit was that it was definitely a little bit strange. It was relatively brand new, so I was probably one of the very first patients that were seen there. So when I first arrived, I had my own room, and it was really eerie because it was really quiet. There really wasn't very many other patients there on the floor. There were even times where I was the only patient on the entire floor there. So the nurses and doctors got to know me really well as I spent some time there. So once I first arrived, it definitely took some adjusting. I had just been released from the ICU, and I was still adjusting to my new life as a person in a wheelchair. And at this point, I wasn't even in a wheelchair yet. It definitely took probably about a month or two before they even tried to put me in an electric wheelchair. So my first few days there, I was definitely connected to a trach then, so I was still learning to breathe on my own. And it was definitely a surreal experience trying to go through that whole process, just trying to learn how to breathe all over again. And it's definitely weird being connected to a machine to help you breathe, and to experience that definitely took some getting used to. But after a while, you learn to not fight the machine and let it do its job and help you get better. Also, while I was there, I did physical, occupational, and respiratory therapy. For respiratory therapy, an RT specialist would come in and do what was like some kind of percussive therapy on my lungs. Since I was fighting a pneumonia, doctors were worried about my lungs filling up with phlegm and being difficult for me to breathe. So every few hours somebody would come in and do therapy on my lungs, which was kind of like some cupping technique where they would pound the sides of my chest with what looked like a face mask, and then from there they would move me side to side just to make sure I was getting some movement and breaking up all the phlegm that was there in my lungs. They did that the whole time I was there for the next 8 months, and it was vital to make sure that I was building up my lungs and making sure they didn't get any more fluid built up inside them, and to make sure my lungs were working properly. Outside of that, I also did physical therapy. Since I was a quadriplegic, I couldn't really move much, but doctors made sure that I was getting the range of motion and avoiding any atrophy in my muscles. Some of the things that we did there was get on a standing frame, and so with that, it's essentially this machine that I would sit on, and then it would pump me up so that I would have like an active standing. I definitely would be supported by the device, but it gave me the ability and the sensation to stand for a few minutes at a time. It wasn't very long because my legs couldn't stand the pressure for much longer than a few minutes. But it was definitely fun. I enjoyed being able to get out of the chair or the bed for a few minutes. You definitely don't realize how much you take for granted when you're just out and about doing your everyday lives, but then to have all that taken away, you definitely appreciate the small things way more than you did before. So just the simple act of standing definitely was a big moment for me, and I enjoyed every moment that I had. There you saw my dog coming down. Ollie's trying to say hello. And then after that, I also did occupational therapy. With that, it's a lot more of the fine motor skills. I did practice writing a little bit. I did gain some finger movement back in my fingers for a little while, so I did even try writing a little bit. It wasn't like complete intricate sentences by any means, and definitely anything that I did write was more squiggly than signatures or any kind of legible handwriting. But it was fun. I enjoyed just doing that. Any type of activity was important to me to make sure that I would continue to build whatever movement I had and practice any kind of sense of normalcy, even if it was just like scribbling on a sheet of paper. So that was always a good, and I appreciated all the work that my therapist did. Shout out to Michelle, she was my physical therapist. Cindy, she did a really good job as an OT. And then Ricardo, my RT, respiratory therapist. They were the three people that I spent the most time with outside of any family or doctors. So shout out to them if they're watching this video. I appreciate your help during that time way back in 97, 98. So I appreciate it. Now, when I wasn't going through therapy, I did do some other activities, including my schoolwork. There was a in-hospital teacher that was there. Her name was Carla. Carla, hello, if you're watching this. She would actually work with the school district back at my high school, and they would send us coursework from most of the classes that I was taking back at Mountain Point. And she would then meet with me pretty much on a daily basis. We'd hammer out the lesson plans, and it's essentially just attending school but in a hospital room. I was a very studious kid when I was little, so being able to keep up with my schoolwork was very important to me. I always got the joke of being the only first grader to walk around with a day planner, so I was really stressed out about what would happen since I was taking such a prolonged break from school and not being able to participate in my freshman year like I wanted to. Was definitely hard, and being able to have this opportunity to continue my schoolwork while still being in the hospital was very important. Now, on the lighter side, Ollie, what's up? One of the funner moments for me was I was a big Spawn fan. Todd McFarlane was one of my favorite comic book artists as a kid. So during this time, Spawn was in movie theaters, and actually one of the very last pictures I took, or one of the last activities I remember before I got sick, was attending the Spawn premiere over here at the OUTV 24 theater here in Phoenix. And so at the time when I was in the hospital, his movie actually came out on DVD, and the child life therapist there found out that I was a fan of Spawn, and I was looking forward to the release of the DVD. And so they decided to put it upon themselves to throw like a Spawn premiere party at the hospital. And so when the DVD was released, they actually got a copy of it, and we did like an impromptu showing. They invited a couple of friends of mine, some family and friends, and they all got together, and we were able to watch the film at what was called, there's like a little activity room there at the end of the hall of the Sub-Acute unit. And so everyone brought like popcorn and foods and drinks, and they even brought a few Spawn gifts for me, which I really enjoyed. I even have a giant poster of the Spawn movie signed by Todd and Al Simmons, who actually was able to visit me while I was at the Sub-Acute unit, just stop by and say hello once word got out that I was a fan. And that was one of the cooler moments that I'll always remember from my time there. Finally, after about 8 months, I practiced a lot, riding around in the wheelchair. I continued to build my lung capacity Even though I was still connected to a vent, doctors felt that I had regained enough strength, not only in my lungs, but in my core to help me sit in a wheelchair effectively. And then they decided in May of 1998 that I would be released. And then after that, I was able to go back to school and start to resume a little bit more of a sense of normalcy once I was able to get out of the hospital. I'll probably talk a little bit more about life once I was back out into the world in a later video. If you have any questions or any topics that you'd like me to cover from that time, definitely leave them in the comments below or shoot me a message on any of your social networks, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, and then I'll be sure to include them in an upcoming vlog. Until then, thanks for watching, and definitely be sure to peruse around my YouTube channel and check out any other videos below. See you later. Have a great day.